with Alyssa and Sam, where we talk about all things life and relationships and tie it back to faith. I'm Alyssa.
And I'm Sam.
And today we are excited to talk to you about active waiting. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Two Trees in a Pod. How are we doing on this fine Tuesday? Election day. Sorry.
Oh, this podcast episode is coming out on Election Day. We missed a good chance to do this on religion and politics. Instead, we have a different topic on the docket. Maybe we'll talk about politics next week. Ooh.
I'm so sick of politics. Why do you think that was nowhere on my radar of ideas for this episode?
Well, on today's episode of No Politics, hopefully we can help you tune out from the election going on.
Yeah, and all the mental chaos that is causing a lot of people. So, I hope this is a space away from that.
Two trees in a pod. Anti-politics.
Pretty much, yeah. So today, we didn't do a little catch-up. We usually do a little catch-up. Sam, How was your weekend?
My weekend was just dandy. Had a good time. Alyssa had a couple volleyball games. My mom came and visited. All was well. Fun weekend. Good time. Alyssa, how was your weekend?
It was awesome to see your mom. She came to our Sunday game, which was so fun. I love when we have people there. It's not just you, because you sit alone up in the stands. So it's nice that when you have people...
I'm not enough for her in the stands.
Oh,
we need
it's
more
just
people.
sad when I look up and you're just sitting by yourself in the stands. But... yeah, and then getting dinner with her was really awesome. I was bummed I didn't get to spend as much time with the two of you on Sunday because I was working, but it is what it is. I got what I got, and I'm not going to throw a fit about it. We clinched first place, but we clinched the playoffs. We didn't clinch
clinched first
place. We secured first place for a week. We are chilling in first for a week by ourselves. For those of you who've been following UNH volleyball, there's been a 4-way tie for first, kind of just throughout this whole thing. And now we're the sole first placers for now, depending on where the cards fall this upcoming weekend. So it would be really cool to get that regular season title because it means I don't have to travel for playoffs. We host it, which I haven't done that since 2021 when I was at Bryant and we hosted the NECs, which was super cool. We lost, but it was super cool to host. And yeah, my weekend was pretty good. I do have an update about the perfume story thing from last week.
Oh, do tell.
If you listened to last week's podcast, you heard us talking about the perfume story with the women at the alabaster jar in the Bible. I believe it's John 12, John 13. It's in one of those.
Sounds about right.
One of those. It's about the woman who pours out her most prized possession, which is this bottle of perfume that's worth a year's wages, onto Jesus' feet and rubs the oil to Jesus' feet with her hair, whatever. The Pharisees are upset. The apostles are upset because they're like, we could have sold that and we could have had the money from that for the ministry, whatever. And the message of that story is like pouring out your most valuable thing and giving it to Jesus and seeing what Jesus does with it, or like worshiping him, Many different ways to interpret that story. Go listen to the episode if you haven't already. But the update from that, and the really cool thing about all that, is that story has been, God has talked to me about that story on 3 separate occasions.
4 now?
4 now, and that's the update.
Aha.
So it was once through a song that was released last weekend. This is literally just last weekend. Last weekend, it was released on Saturday. Saturday night, my team did a Bible study on the perfume story that I didn't know about. And then Sunday morning, there was a church service in our hotel lobby in New Jersey, and they did the perfume story. And this was all within 24 hours. So super cool. And then on Wednesday, I have coach's Bible study on Wednesday. It's during the workday. It's fun. It's like my lunch break. I tell our pastor, because it was just me and him who showed up to coach's Bible study. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to tell him about this perfume story thing. And he's like on fire about it, whatever. He's making connections. So that ends. I go back to work, whatever. He goes and does whatever he does for the rest of his Wednesday. And then I get a text from him at like 7 at night. And he's like, Alyssa, I was driving home and I was listening to the radio. And the devotional that came on was on the perfume story. like just out of nowhere. So God's been really, really loud lately, which has been super cool. And that's it kind of has something to do with what we're talking about today, which this has officially been our longest intro ever. But that was worth sharing. Today we're talking about active waiting. And active waiting is different than passive waiting because...
Because you're supposed to be doing things in the waiting. Just because you're waiting for that next step doesn't mean you're idle and doing nothing during that time. The biggest part of all of the waiting is what are you doing during it? In a lot of our periods of life, we're waiting for things. Like right now, we have a wedding in May. We're waiting. There's Christmas, holidays, events, so many things coming up. We're waiting for a lot. I'm sure everyone listening is waiting.
We had to wait to start recording this podcast episode because our cat would not settle down.
Exactly. So what are you doing in the waiting? Because you can't just sit there the whole time. You have to be doing something. What should you be doing?
Yeah, and active waiting is about... So there's a reason God has you wait. And the active waiting is when you are in communication with God about what the purpose of your wait is for. And if God's making you wait for something, you're in pretty solid company. Like, who had to wait in the Bible? Abraham? How many years did he have to wait for his promise from God to be fulfilled? Do you even know off the top of your head? Because I don't, but it was like freaking 100 years or something. Like
80?
He became a father at like 90 something.
Yeah.
Sarah, Hannah, who else had to wait? Joseph.
Everyone had to wait.
Everyone
There's
had to
not
wait.
a single person with no waiting.
Well, I'm sure that there's one.
Who?
I don't know, not off the top of my head.
See? Everyone has to wait.
But our point is,
Not God.
You're in good company if you're waiting. I heard something that, like, what did it say? That a day is like 1,000 years to God, but 1,000 days is like, or 1,000 years is like one day to God. If that makes sense. Like, time is just... It's just different to him than it is for us. And our life on earth is such this tiny little fraction of that. And so these long waits that we feel like we have, like we're waiting, our wedding's in 6 months, that feels like it's so far away. But we've also been engaged for how many?
A year and a half?
A year and a half, yeah. A year, just under a year and a half.
Yeah, about that.
And that feels like it was just, like it flew by. So I think we'll start. We're like halfway through our time. I wanted to share some verses. There's tons of verses about waiting in the Bible, but we'll start with Psalm 27:14. Wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. And then Isaiah 40:31. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Lamentations 3:25. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. Waiting is not a negative thing. And what we're leading into is if you're in a period of waiting, whether it's to meet the one or to get married or for a health issue to go away or to see your family again or to get that job, to get that promotion, to get that raise, or to start your family, or to get that degree even. Like, there's so many things that we wait for in this life. There's a reason that it's not there yet. And that's the purpose of active waiting. And this episode was kind of born out of this little quote I saw today, which is what a lot of our episodes are born out of, actually. What does a waiter do? Like, a waiter in a restaurant. What does a waiter do while they are waiting? What do they do, Sam?
I don't know, Alyssa. Why don't you tell me?
A waiter serves. A waiter serves his or her tables. So what are the tables in your life in this period of waiting that you need to be serving? is there some sort of ministry you're supposed to be focusing on right now? There's things that we're waiting for right now, and I feel like God is calling me to serve the table of these young women that I'm around. And I feel like my day-to-day is meant to be serving them. Serving not only my college-age women that I'm around, but I'm coaching club volleyball in the spring, and quite honestly, I'm really stressed out about the time commitment of it because I'm also recruiting coordinator for UNH. And for those of you who know volleyball, spring is the busiest time ever for that. And with travel too, and club volleyball runs the whole spring, and we're getting married in May. So like I'm stressed up the wazoo about that. But I feel like God is making me wait for other things in my life because I'm meant to serve. And that is how I'm meant to serve. And those are my tables. I have to wait my tables. How about you, Sam? What's a table for you right now that you're supposed to be waiting on?
And your tables always change. So I think the easiest and clearest example that I can think of in my life was when I was unemployed last year. I was waiting for a job. There's only so many jobs you can apply for. I had hundreds of applications out, and I'm waiting on responses. Well, what was I doing in the waiting? Well, I had a lot of spare time on my hands. I was able to focus on my health. I was able to focus on my friendships. I was able to focus on a lot of things that I wouldn't have had that time to do otherwise.
You served the heck out of me during that time.
Yeah, I served Alyssa. I served our living arrangement. There were so many things that I was able to put my time into because I was waiting on that. Right now, I'm waiting for different... So, for the poker stuff that I do, right now, we finally got games back. So we've been playing on every Friday.
Sam runs a poker company, for those of you who don't know. I don't even know if you've ever mentioned that on this podcast.
So we are now running games every Friday, and that's fantastic. But guess what? There's 6 other days of the week, which means even though we're making progress, it does feel like a wait before that next day, because it feels like those steps aren't moving until you see things are happening the entire time. There is progress being made all week. But the reality is, it doesn't always feel that way because you have these days in mind and these dates in mind and these goals in mind. And the biggest mistake a lot of us make is say that we don't see the progress until something happens. When the reality is, the progress is happening the entire time, and then eventually something kind of tips the scales to where it's noticeable.
God is working.
Yeah,
in that whole time.
Like Dirt, I've lost a lot of weight. Well, at what point is it like, oh, I achieved weight loss? Because you're losing an ounce multiple times throughout a day if you're losing weight. So it's like, okay, well, when did I lose weight? When did I get to that point? When was this a success? So it might feel like, oh, I just worked out today and I just dieted and my scale went up. Well, I didn't make any progress. Well, actually you did. You did the right things. You took a step in the right direction. And now it's about the consistency aspect. And you're waiting for things to happen. But in the waiting, doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And staying in constant communication with God about what you are supposed to be doing. I kind of liked... Sam and I talk a lot about this because I think one of your gifts, Sam, is like being able to hear God as loud as you do all the time because you were always talking to him. Like faith and peace are 2 of your spiritual gifts. And you always say like, well, it's easy for me to make decisions because I just ask God if it's something I should do, not something I can do, because like Paul says, all things are lawful, but not all things are good. He says that, what, in Corinthians?
Yeah.
Or Romans?
That was something. So when I first started my prayers out, it's like, oh, can I do this? Yeah. Can I do this? Yeah.
You're getting a whole lot of yeses.
It's like, wow, I can do pretty much anything. Well, that didn't go well. I didn't enjoy that. That wasn't a good result.
That impacted that other person negatively.
And then it's like, have another conversation. It's like, well, it said I can do all these things. What's wrong? It's like, well, you can do all things. should you? And then that kind of took me aback. It's like, you know what? That's right. And then it points to scripture. All things are lawful, but not all things are good. So I started rephrasing my prayers to, well, should I do this? When I'm truly looking for guidance in some things. Because sometimes we're humans. Ooh, can I have dessert? Like, you know the answer. You know you probably shouldn't have that extra dessert, but you want to. And that's okay, because that happens. You're human. But when you are coming to these situations where you truly don't know which step you should be taking, giving God that space and saying, what should I be doing right now?
Should is the key word there.
It doesn't even need to be a, should I do this, yes or no? Mm-hmm. If you're in a moment where you don't know what you should be doing, because there's plenty of times where you don't know what the next step is, take a step back, give God the space, and say, what should I do right now? And if you actually and genuinely take that step back and give him the space to answer, and don't let your own mind and your own feelings and your own wants creep in that question, you're going to be shocked at what the answer is, because typically it's a lot more clear than you think.
And what's it like to give him the space to answer? It's sitting in quietness. And that's not even just sitting there in quietness, like in complete silence, doing nothing, but sometimes it looks like having quiet time with your Bible. Psalm 130 verse 5 says, I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. I feel like a lot of what we should do, we can find the answer in the Bible, and God will reveal it to us through us being disciplined and staying in his word. And that's so important when the waiting for whatever it is you are waiting for is difficult, is what is God wanting you to do with that wait?
Well, one of the best Bible verses that is so difficult to follow for most of us is, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways submit to him. When you're making these decisions and you don't know what you should be doing, we really like to base things off the facts and logic in our experiences to justify or to make things go the way we think they should go and make the decisions that quote unquote make sense. That's not giving God space to work. Trying to justify and rationalize everything is not giving God any space to work. It's giving you full control. So the hardest part of relinquishing that control is the humbling of yourself saying, I don't know what to do next. And a lot of us, we're perfectly okay with saying, I don't know what the next steps are. I don't know what to do next. But then when you give God the space and then you feel a pull in a direction and your immediate reaction is, oh, no, that doesn't make sense. I wouldn't do that right now. You should, no, that doesn't sound like the right thing. What else should I do? What actually is the next step? It's like, well, it's a lot of the time it's not going to be something you want to hear. That's just a fact. Sometimes it is, and that's always a fantastic feeling. But the reality is, if you're in a spot and you don't know what your next step is, and you're actively humbling yourself and praying and saying, what should my next step be?
Not what I want it to be, or what I think it should be.
What should I do next?
What do you have for me, God?
Yeah. And I don't want to say blindly listening, but faithfully listening, knowing that that's the right thing to do. When you get tugged in that direction, just follow.
And you'll know, because when it's a God thing, little pieces that should be a little tougher to fall into place. And when God opens a door, he opens a million other little doors to make that one big door open. And if it's something that you shouldn't be doing, he'll make that clear too, because you're going to have to force it. It's going to be like putting a square through a circle peg hole. I think I used that comparison a lot in our season math episode. But yeah, if it's a God thing, it should just work. And that's not to say that there's not going to be struggles with the God thing.
It's not saying you shouldn't put forth effort and you shouldn't plan.
Or that it's going to be find some peace and ways to be active in your wait, whatever that wait might be for. Talk to God. That's the only piece of advice we can really give you here.
Talk to God and then let him respond.
Nah!
And give him the space to respond.
Yeah. Well, have a great rest of your Tuesday. See you next week, and stay blessed.